last gap was 2003.
The different metal is about to be here in 6 years, trust. Bro, no.
That's kind of crazy.
Alright. It's sent when you know everyone is ready. Certified barter sandwich. Yeah. We begin with the narrative of the leper since the dawn of the Middle Ages. Leprosy has been identified as a demonic process, one that must possess and infect bodies of the pure with blackened skin and polluted flesh. European travel sought to disease to be an outwardly phenomenon to which we must bracket out and securitize against and so borders, both material and metaphorical growth, to ensure that no moment may pollute our self-determined profession. So long as we maintain separation, that the human leper can neither erode the purity nor chastity of man, such as the allegory of the abject inoculation of man's darkness was violent revolt, weaponized against the right which neither emanates from inside nor outside, neither subject nor object detected beyond the scope of the possible, the tolerable, the thinkable, the figure of the leper, thus represents the rotting corpse, destroying the very capacity to cohere the normal body. This decomposing corpse, known to be the object, defies the law to capture as exemplified by borders, resulting in a subsequent expulsion from the very condition of thought and language, a necessary condition to compose or conception of the self. However, expulsion is a process with neither beginning nor end. Traces of the object always seem to or discourse and debate calls together to ask who am I, precipitate, subject sort of the protect his origin, unfolds his identity, article to shift through, our running reveals us through the inside of Christ, and he maintained a well-defined stable identity with the stations and discharge of my movement region. Its reason is the breakdown of self-expression, but if he brings rejection of rejection, over a long relationship to age of light, metaphoric breach of disease, dismantled of persona, the post-political self, liberated zone is now a side of a principal passing for travel solving, a collusion to figure body with society, which the liberty zone enters into culture, meaning the object of sugar by the capital of disease bodies, a breakdown of the established order, meaning the underprinciplity of this object, reduces identity to indefinable state of not being the product body single condition of the image between the object, initiates the return of the repressed and others who receives and possesses them, the change to bring the color of life from revolution to volatility to release it to uncover the object within itself, to the dissolution of orders, positions, rules associated with symbolic and overall laws are realized by nature being captured in the existential thread. Justice expulsion is not an isolated event. The object is not a relic of the past, rather immigration policy still getting his dark undertows of the leper cloning, where the object leper is caught between containment and necrophilic fascination, made imprisonment and simultaneous experimentation is here in search of a cure for its pathology, including as screen breaching and various rituals to extract the disease from its desecrated body through this dualistic ontology. Citizenship reverses inextricable from cultural commoditization, a function that must undergird the rise of peace and civility, that immigrant becomes a disposable commodity to guarantee the supposed rigor and interest. 98 lepers are translated into states, and few might be performed here in the center colonies and the colonies, which speak the language of self-mastery. The non-lepers we taught to get the rest model for the making of men out of savages in the micro-colony work of civilization. But lepers have been enrolled in advance of the non-lepers, matter is acceptable in inclusive citizenship as repressive as it was liberating. As part of modern such information, leper citizen became an individualized case record oriented towards a continued therapeutic future. Although the endemic of leprosy has begun to vanish, its efforts are caused several and modern emission changes remain intimately tied to leprosy. Maintaining standards of inclusion isn't a benign omission, rather a cog in an overarching machinery which is uncivilized immigrant must replace leper pathology of criminality to satisfy civility, superiority, calm and spite. Not associated of leprosy with immigrants, starting anti-immigrant sentiment in the West. Leprosy is imagined to cause fractured rot and list of powerful metaphor carrying the ills must need to be caused by foreign population. The most of is essential to man and part people regard when suspect populations are creating artificial matters that fears that lepers would overtake America. It influenced the currency, but also leprosy was more than a disease. It was also an ideological symbol of the danger. The revulsion evoked upon it by countering leprosy is launching themselves in closure, threatening both solidarity and survival. Each side would act as an act of contact with the disease, flash and solid. Embrace of abject horrors, the meaning of dishealing, a great conception of the tranquil, healthy subject is foundation of order. Just goes only injecting invented flesh into our research patterns can be redefined what it means to dwell in the world. Edmund 1. The leper is a transition of the fundamental boundaries of left for that the human courses, which is surrounded by rituals to prevent contamination of the living, impossibility of a clear distinction between clear and clean and unclean, of order that has encroached upon everything, death infecting like the outer body challenges the symbolic order that integrity of the body challenge of a body training inside out, revealing consciousness as another foundational boundary that between the visceral self and the world, the rose fear, the invisible or the unknown, proposed desire for expressly affirm opening borders to the adjective as a strategy of welcoming infiltration by the local product under our advocacy challenges the processes of borderization that shapes sociality and maybe 19 presses participating states operating well with borders detailed removed for a certain population, physical virtual appearance, attracting devices drugs, first for the border in the name of security, mobile, omnipresent realities. Borders are the name we use to describe the violence that underpins our border borderization. Certain spaces are transformed into uncrossable places. Extension of the border is the human body, at least can no longer be forced to count. They defeat citizens who need to be alive as co-terms with the capacity to move. Not everybody's thought of as continuing life or most exposed to drugs or sources of famine, toxic waste. Their life is made impossible to send him in life from these kind of bodies is the key dimension. Moving restrictions are work on a global scale. The average claims leprosy transgressing the border between the clean and unclean, shattering imperialist fantasies. States leprosy is about matter to reestablish categories and redefine a relationship to the world by keeping the clean from the unclean. The border that define itself by distinction from its surroundings is intersected with inside outside. In the context of imperialist expansion, the inside is pretty intensified as no powers extending their control. Our pursuit of the object is a condition for possibility for the creation of new meaning, identity, knowledge, justice, role, balance, confront, objection, semester, between short condition as living vermin, violent, dark, revolts of being binary, opposite, true versus false, right and wrong, way become absurd, fragile fluid. Interpretation is not as relational. Human beings actually exist in between life and death. My body extracted from the border. I say spelled so desperate and feels overwhelmed that it becomes greater than stable such as safety. Our separation leads to the thought of becoming jettison. Gods are size become other symbiotic breakdown. The course of dramatically reminding us of an signifying Russia's videos. The breakdown of existing media is creating a new one. The alien other remains foreign and strange objections most first because of the sheer by indecision. Break down a world that is racist borders. The ego undergoes humiliation and laws beyond comprehension. Education becomes transformative, creative, a new meaning, a new way of life. Learning is produce one for one fortified castle because they're called fitting after you construct a dominant social order, empowering by my martial bodies and granting agency back to the actions handable. Sanchez suggestion. What is not respect borders follows with the examination in relations power that fuel common waiver racism, xenophobia, machismo, and agephobia, agile bodies, influence confusion of boundaries with fragment stability of the hegemonic such as the learning to contaminate the symbolic order and all systems of cultural order. People, the unclean and improper other is translated as agile bodies, hand transgress borders, love for emancipation, politics of abjection, trouble the condition of the social order by destabilizing normal through performative abjection. The marvelous can gain agency, self-empowered challenging their master with destruction of order. Robust neuroscience, severe fire theory, geological, 19 drop fast and homostatic subpoint, and upper races, system rafted, the PhD website consciousness, upper races. With our recitation, this feels fits well to the contract sense. It's a limit system. We willing to risk the world face genocidal. Our imagination is before the moon. We're raising after hurling 17 nuclear ways. Very different possibilities. Why may never refer to the past. The past is not life side to side with the present. Reveal the possibility that defined not by the essence of the future by the possibility of contracting any mechanism by which we might imagine specific future. Neither is under any radical futures. This epistemal challenge to human the nuclear temporality saying obvious response to return from the past to the future where all the days would return again. Non-linear time period use of politics to transfer to the present.
Cut Hurley at first for the present. Ready for CS.
What does it mean for the lever to be the object?
What does it mean for the lever to be the object? We've made an argument for why leprosy, we begin the 1AC with a narrative of leprosy, and we've said that this process has evolved through time, and today, even though leprosy is a rather rare disease, I'm getting to answer your question. Even though it's a rare disease, modern admission standards are existing to exclude the object.
I guess if the app obviously doesn't only define leprosy in terms of like the literal disease, what does leprosy mean in context of the app?
The literal disease. Well, leprosy sort of an example of the thesis claim we have made about how objections structure sociality, which is all the first part of the app. The Christian move of the evidence isolates stories of how the object exists. The object exists within the figure of leprosy. And to answer your question, the white evidence.
What does it mean for the object to exist in the figure of leprosy?
We think that the people who have experienced leprosy could embody objection. That is the entire point of the examples that we isolated at the top of the app. But
Okay, so
the white
is
evidence.
that objection limited to people who experience leprosy or also other people?
No, of course not. Like right now, leprosy is a quote-unquote rare disease,
Okay, so
but our white
clarify the
evidence, I'm not going to be able to answer, you've asked the same question like 5 times, I can't answer it.
Because I'm trying to get to a point, but
Right.
to clarify the asked point is that the figure of the leper is
The leper is the intro to the affirmative, not the affirmative's advocacy.
got it. What does it mean to then open borders to the leper?
Yeah,
Or to
well,
the object?
to the abject, that's the entire point. We never said open borders to the leper. Opening borders to the abject, we made a unique exclaim about how violence and borders have arisen as a mechanism of distancing ourselves from objection, from the other who sort of threatens our own security in ourselves. This is a legacy that is rebranded by modern migration policy, thinking as immigrants, AIDS,
sense.
COVID examples.
Okay.
Just read the app. I think it makes sense. What?
Did you extend anything in the
No.
app? What is the point of the images?
What is the point of the images? I think the images, to some way, describe what the affirmative advocacy.
What do they describe about the affirmative advocacy?
Well, they portray images that are normally disturbing, things that make people cringe upon seeing them, which are the sort of which is the sort of entrance into objection in academic spheres that are semester.
If the authors critiqued the view of the leper as disturbing, and then you put
No.
no.
This is an important clarification. We have not critiqued the view of the leper as disturbing. We reclaim the figure of the leper because our argument is that those disturbing moments ruptured what it means to exist as a subject, and that is the only way to engage in the objection that the absence is valuable.
Okay, sure. The card about robust neuro studies verifying your theory. What theory is that?
A theory
How
of.
does the app use a theory of the psyche to
Wait,
demonstrate?
what? The entire app is a theory of the psyche. The Semetsky evidence describes how describes the process of objection. It describes how objection comes into being through drives and desires. I can explain that more if you want. Should I? You want me to?
Okay, so at 412.
It's order.
Okay. On 6? Or, yeah, 6. Case.
Wait, what'd you say?
6, that case.
Ready.
Everyone not good.
Interpretation of the negative shall be worded with retorting against the purpose that depend on something other than the desirable image of the last result. To know for one solution, it was 13th element truth for one solution result. Voters would actually vary formal citizenship, entries of participation in country, artists, much more participation, use and entry card participant, interference in preferential citizenship, tells people move freely across states and settle rural citizenship. Human migration is permanent change of residence, which human migration permanent change of residence is movements, transitory in nature. TVA open borders for lepers. When you see Christian Murthy's, the advocate says that the figure of the leper haunts immigration policy can bring an advantage about the symbol of immigration like green hills goes in back. So after the way the lepers are represented in the immigration system, vote neg one fairness back vouchers, shows grants for the made neg immigration structure on top of the plans and allows them to monopolize moral high ground, which seems to be too far in favor of the Afghanis. First, A debaters fumbling gave the Christ better competition. They found the fact that they adhere to speech times after the ballot. It's out of being controlled the interpolate. The reason people do research is because they think that they can win. Second, clash with a well-prepared opponent. Top, while Stacey produces iterative and in-depth strategies that are prerequisite to debates. Pedagogical value. Their model does not allow counter-argumentation that causes confirmation bias, whereas the problem is a lack of rigorous argumentation that destroys the skills necessary to make material change in the world. O'Donnell and Harker don't say anything is the capitalist says that by possibly will help resolve geopolitical crisis skills and precondition for engagement to participate in evidence that also for 20 study over 50 years they better to enhance control thank debates and a little associated with this practice matter really not graduate because much research debate than any other activity called defensive or whatever point of evidence. A third, independent expertise voting. You should think you can infinitely unpredictable things to resolution defending open borders. And other things does not solve for because of course the activity your accountability to get back to bad zero draw the debate or close question. Our ability to engage with our machines that they can't weigh the case. Next off settler colonialism. There's the permitting structure nation which corrects the elimination of the life land without just the permission land dangerously goes to child slaves into access labor to all the residents of the settler colonization where to permission of the life land that is the sovereign all things other than the capital destruction of each ruling land represents them on what also not violence of not topic of base research into formations on the business structure not involved so few first language child models not with the not being equipped who can landless space. Person that is the essence of the child resource actually with that can make things famous to be for problem and service diverse not just conversation and then folks people to quick contradictory or political size political conversation to an empty it's environment filled by trying to resolve conversation must hold the page line indigeneity must be the rest is a ghostly thing whose manifesto orientation towards the world is not one of absence and presence idiot things no longer constructed through bodily lens but rather through the impossible expectation of the intersection bodies and subjectivities Cornelia 13 the idiot is a thing not limited by the material ability colonial state all communities live in relation to indigenes thing that can be represented by desire exists or received by someone or something who necessarily itself it's even religion by presented absent representation rather comes in terms of the implicit or absent of close to the possible citation board from the media bodies associated with and anything with those contributions to naturals and soft humanity
business or little state force. What is that with the foundation for sovereignty requires anti-racist and anti-colonial investments together castle keeping guarding the demands of public if we obtain and choose self-opponents. Their explanation of racial balance is product of symbolic systems and discussing power dynamics is a move towards spatial neutrality that naturally clear of land. In the formation of white supremacy, Brecken and 9 axes of culture sensing with these geopolitics whatever race spaces away from finishing sovereignty such castle just like people still safe better than all of but also Japan's cultivity on face in words to contest the variety solution control migrant with limits liberation to clear difference but the solid policy cannot account for the social violence performed by sovereignty theorizing immigration but the starting point is low poverty violence is reliant on western field and construction of territorial sovereignty economic dissenting from self governments which can only cure yourself positioning indigenous and anachronism within the realm of established states bold the deep migration precision cannot just be considered since the list was made this not revolution reflect on immigration scholarship things about states west of the triple sovereignty single sovereignty control territorial legal jurisdiction representation states as a jurisdiction outside the sovereignty law western speech as from west of the state non-nationality search over sovereignty which was an exception code the card an exception the alternative is decolonization then tucking in good common nothing great so it says constitution which motivates some loose since we consider through advancing so long western state for choice of the question of decolonization will be the concept for seller because we're not to question obvious for decolonization is secure decolonization non-white and could not come on solo self future decolonization is capital through this topic future will come into better decolonization not it's not and it's also for next off interpretation the negative burden is to negate any of the aspects including one I see frames across the modes we can agree with the vast majority of the application still an only conditional just limited agreement instead of narrowing those specific claims requires to dispute the entire afforce extreme that measures law that lack nuance and political utility anything else is the disaster for background not to amend the resolution means you should expand combination to include the entire of the 1AC also key to critical to refinement we need to test our find specific parts 1AC parts and to get the whole ask means relegate to defend racism or Josh good next off we advocate the entirety of the 1AC except the use of visual images which at the ableist with 1AC's ocular centrism early and alternative to the incidentally visual access initial system that goes to replace website of events and like I said there's up to be list of access initial place center and web but landed on that move beyond ocular center essentially we're truly inclusive information for all turns the case ocular centrism is rooted in majority Q's 90 of radical disability says across from particular majority that the prejudice is equivalent to visual constitution pyramid assumption but it's disease no but it's by ocular centers and demonstrate the opposite because because of the world that I claims to discover that the validation of impaired bodies is ableism must be challenged to the level of writer journey they love the ableist culture sustains a spirit virtue still few writer who use such information but listeners to the list is that most sensitive from a writer able to think along by their impact reduces physical potential next off negative towards the alpha that their description of leprosy is a metaphor for political violence don't stigmatize leprosy using it as an analytic for social dislocation who gets ableist violence and stigma no sapa and all 13 leprosy is completely curable it can be a couple of leprosy not disable all perception survey for space stigmatizing like the offensive term leper also carries the about Africa such a criminal contributes to discrimination the disease metaphor for corruption or country returns makes our original good devastating social economic psychological leprosy can have in the context that we address the letter use the term leprosy no something negative for undesirable limit the stigma. Next off, we endorse the alpha without the reformation of the words of Kristeva or studying Kristeva's work from which is based in theory. We've inserted 3 cards that they read below, and you can command F that it shows up at least 30 times. The author's Orientalist reading Kristeva's theory round is a reason to lose more since 16 Kristeva. As a first Chinese sacred discipline because of sexual body, tribal and Chinese based that she's blind. It is the same words the cities better. So majority Chinese women as her own history became this of an all that she turned her back on multi like novel novel. And the rest of the case, the leper is not subject to bare life, and the usage of metaphor is bound to admit in 6 because they got to the colon dimension, but can absolutely be constituted as it is with the East, which lovers are really become the idea of the concept such as precepts, abdication, comments, where left the reality for lovers, the modern period, which more often more less metabolic medicine resisted the idea of the lovers to be isolated, believes that human rights, the physicians, scientists, supervised the camps of left with the integration of medicine with politics, and it was also resisted by global medicine for much of the 19th century. The level was less than a little bit realized in a contested pursuit of the emerged by Protestant. The reverse meditation cultural studies results in the creation of the body and one that is both revelation of the explanation of the genesis of conscious which are predicted discourses sustained by establishing mountains by medicine delivery shape so the discursive produce tradition or translation between the large social side basis Spanish for efficacy and influence studies that results in spread passing knowledge between the metaphor and social and the ideological production of people and metaphor rather than materially ground history. The role of the ballot is to vote for the better debater. It's the only non-arbitrary standing point and key to assess any kind of debate which is substantial about all of our other claims. Don't buy the totalizing claims, but metaphors of leprosy assume a single disease that causes exclusion. Their analysis is based on the flawed assumptions of the nature of leprosy, which answers every root cause and impetus a framework they'll make admin and sexuality. The promises of leprosy of Leviticus, for instance, why describe this in clinical ideas of the Christian Leviticus, the society of fear, the anti-communist reference of a common transistor, remember, vulture, the disease, or disease, shaman, is a role specifically based on the image that run them together. The answer to the first question is almost simply not relevant to yourself in a very generic for a wide range of after done is what's possible. And essential, their theory of language and the psyche ignores material action. Peter's 99, the test is we're not such a communication vulture and good to both to say communication as possible as not saying cannot cooperate or underplays and mentality and derivative of movement, the ordinary child that specify better communication that recent either the purest factor of others or the possibility of things with words, language is the most reliable means persuasion through language. It's not clear what I see self. I think it does. It's so much as a children Ash perhaps doesn't remember the wellness and science issues or other spread. Thought that we must find ways to get on with business. They're inevitable and patterns of framework apply equally to them. Saying fairness is bad is not an answer to our arguments because they also assume fairness and that you will judge all of the arguments using that you will judge all of the arguments neutrally. Also chose to participate in things like speech times, certain forms of cards, etc., which means that they should be forced to defend the entirety of the app, which is also a justification for the case.
Like everything's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Ready for cross?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, the settler colonialism critique, can you explain the link?
So we have two links, or two broad links. First is the immigration link. Argument is that starting from the theorization of immigration or immigration exclusions as a product of things like product violence or perceptions of migrants as
Why should a
disease.
judge center indigeneity in decision processes?
What does that mean?
Like, why is it
we have made a
important?
claim that the assumption, because anything else causes erasure. We read the Volt evidence, which says
Great.
that position
Research project matters. Okay.
Sorry. Yes,
seems
obviously
to-
your research matters.
great,
I think
okay,
you read 3
yeah.
picks out of your research.
Yeah, I know. We're standing on Lake City in Kentucky right now. Who are the tribes?
The Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Osage. Yeah, there's
Is that
also
it?
a lot of tribes. There's also the Delaware. There's a lot of indigenous tribes that claim access to this territory.
Okay. Can you explain why settlers have a psychological drive to eradicate native life? What explains that libidinal drive?
Well, we don't need to win that there is one, but we presented a different theory of that. Well, first we've critiqued that very frame. The focus on discursive or psychological or libidinal flames to understand violence is wrong, because the argument is that violence operates geopolitically or through spatial instances of violence, as opposed to perceptions of people or things like abjection or things like the figure
Okay,
of the leper. The
that's
argument
fine.
is that is not a way to describe violence, and the assumption that some psychic libidinal investment can explain
That's
that
fine.
is just
That's
wrong.
fine. Topicality. What's the violation?
We've read a bunch of cards. You don't defend actual migration. You defend opening it to the figure of the object. You
When did
can't
we say
migrate.
that?
Huh?
When did we say that?
That's like.
And why does that violate? Desirability of topical action. Resolution says open borders. We said open borders. What's the violation? In fact, wait, you don't even have a violation in the 1 and C. It seems like a new 2-hour argument if you go for it.
No, we didn't. We put 3 cards. You don't need that.
You put 3 cards.
We said
Okay,
open
contextualize
borders
them
to
to
the
the app.
object.
Contextualize them to the app. Why?
Okay, human migration. What does it mean for the object to migrate? I don't even think you put human migration in the plan. Second, it's a formal reduction in barrier. It's a legal decision that
So it's a legal decision. Okay, apps have to defend. So every affirmative has to defend legal decisions.
It's not like open borders is a law, but it's that the implementation of open borders
So we have to
happens
defend
at
the
level
implementation of open borders? Is that
Sorry,
your
what?
So we have to
to defend the consequences of open borders for human migration. You're just forgetting the second half of the resolution. You can't open
Okay,
it to
okay,
an
okay.
object,
I'm just
open it to a
asking, like,
figure.
underneath your model, do apps have to defend implementation of open borders? Like, in implementation of.
I don't know what that means. You have to defend the consequences of it. Well,
Okay,
under our
can you give me
okay,
like examples of topical action?
Actually, I want to say something. Our interp does not force you to read anything. We have just said if you choose not to defend res, we don't have to negate you. So you can still read whatever app you want. We just shouldn't be burdened with rejoinder against it.
Sure.
But second, the app yes has to defend the consequences of it, but you can also defend symbolic affirmations of it, right?
Wait, we can? We can defend symbolic affirmations.
Well, in the
Ooh.
context of opening of
You just screwed yourself over. Said policy action, and then you just said we could defend a symbolic
I get it.
affirmation,
I was
and
about
that's
to talk.
topical. And that is CX. I'll start craft right now.
Okay. Like yes, the Greenhills app is
Nope.
topical.
out rep, I'll just not do anything until it comes back. But if you want to organize your flow,
2 over 2 taken. Order is just aft and C top down. And
Yo, Ansh, what was the ethics violation on Semiocat?
Semiocat? Oh, it wasn't on Semiocat. I'll explain it after that.
Okay, thanks, bro.
okay. Order is just case NC Austin.
Is there a dog?
No.
Give me a second.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Civil society spider upon a current request of person, the added discussing what will the other that Russia's illusion, stable sensitivity, violence, and borders, roses, magnetism of the seas ourselves with the added leper is the ability remained by water migration policy, decolonize immigrants, but after doors, open borders for human migration, inserting added borders, bodies into normative civil society, throws it into a crisis by bringing society to contact with what it fears, the most role of balance, confront action, debate, and force discussions on the ways in which society drives our pretended eradicate under Sebesky says that's necessary to foster ethical relationality, frame the major education metaphysics, even if escape orientation can happen within the metaphor, or if it disagrees with us. It says that the leper epitomizes biopolitics. We are not an appropriation of the body, we ritual objection towards material ends, which is a bit domestic evidence. You take for the better debater. Argument is that you cannot put on the better debater asking for confronting objection first, because otherwise your perspective was epistemically skewed. That was on above. You say total listing. Again, we've applied leprosy to objection. Remember the plain text. We didn't say open borders for the leper, open borders for the objection, because we applied leprosy and the ways in which people are excluded, but we never said it was a singular disease, rather a process of exclusion that continues in the modern era, which was a Peter's evidence. The Peter's evidence proper. The app controls the internal link for why people engage in material violence in the first place, which will be done when we're in the proceeding. We've also considered ideological evidence, which says that reflecting upon living like outcomes is the only way to describe the world, and controls internally to materials are consistent, which is they should hold the line of certainty. They said that every army concedes the authority of fairness, done more top quality, but we have an aim pattern all fairness. Fairness that sustains balance, no walls of debate that is held. Deliberate top quality, we meet the absence of social care, we defend that justice over cars, open borders for human migration, and policy implementation, which I do to our extrapolation makes debate laboring and irresolvable. Yes, the one sees that open borders for the actor, but our white emphasis that all neighbors have become the figure of the actor, which is that the outflows everyone in, solves their office every day, just like counterplay came from some open borders links do prag. We're still extra topical, basically we defend we're still when we're extra topical, I defend that here extra topical is good because I'm more design hate, and I see looks like the objection decide warrant K. I just see by reading a pig out of all the extra topical parts of the all centers the debates centers the debate around the resolution. Anyways, independently will impact T1 objection decide their demand to bracket out errors that don't conform to the logic of during the objection adherence to the rules and procedures of the game upholds a general version thing which shields itself from leprosy, believing that it's our solvency, shying away that outweighs shying away from the confronting the actor tries to subject and symbolic reproducing homophobia, racism, and more than Sanders and Sandoval. Sanders has their sort of fairness argument limits flow out. The topic doesn't mandate policy action because there's no actor action, but their internal laws as a stagnation and implementation process, which is extra topical. Sources sound like to be impossible to debate this game, but sure, the research encouraged that the game encourages the matter because iterative effects, investments, affects sensitivity, limited topic might be necessary, but cross-apply or answer above. We impact the education they produce. True testing. We should get to weigh the efficacy and anything else for clash. We 6 minutes of the one to see clash. Best of which of the states would clash our weak impact debates in our formal migration policy. Now, this that colonial democracy top level, there's a performative contradiction. Reading how T and calls and profoundly said feelings center indigenous scholarship is racer, but then proceeded to justify procedural fairness comes first winner now because A is premeditated because you knew it was bad, but anyways be forced to the wonder to double turn itself, which justifies the least rejecting the K and topicality, but said call proper for image revolution policy said message to be as capable of producing decolonization laws because people to decide on the ways in which our research implicates native communities, making natives into functional options and consisting their fantasy of being a true revolutionary to permutation to both through the act and the mindset of the all said call offensive agile bodies by creating borders of exclusion that the actor always exists in space between our transition kill us and our state by bringing into contact with the actor fears the most research limits made by symbiotic forces, not sort of material forces, which is life holding powers to start natives and poor, unsanitary, uncivilized, and unclean, which is why native Hawaiians were portrayed as inferior for self-government, justifies American imperialism, only way to challenge balances through the liberal forward. They can't explain why there was want to murder indigenous people, door the psychic, the moves that structure which only the assholes think about indigenous people were simultaneously British alcoholic and communist savages of well-being psychologically indisputable creatures as the adjective to be cured the frame overuse the voting sealed addict and disabled labor, which to be punished to counterpunch to be functional terms of medicated their testing desirable and parody based on a single word either one along case it's under right solving generics and there's no net ground stuff, there's not reasonable goods neg and anyone argued the pig visual images are good. 17 says that we cover the figure of the deformed agile bodies opens their own borders to the court objection, terrifying liberal sensitivity, creating easy fire rushers their Lucas premise on jump forcing disabled voters look at the app. We just use our own images as our own engagement. The other pig link term, the app does not literally describe leprosy as a stigmatizing experience. We reclaim leprosy through objection and mutual desires. That was yes, and this is the next link we didn't highlight this part. The evidence about voting app retools for service work towards better aims. They conceded that embracing increasing adjustment and improvement by images causes such a issue, which is the case. This is not intrinsic to the theory. This is that. If we should be held for that, then they should be held accountable for any firm for how it's been weaponizing as possible. So illegal, which means that this is litigation either way.
centrism pick, like the images pick, then the frame subtraction stuff,
Wait, sorry, what was the first pick?
the images pick,
Okay.
then frame subtraction, then T, then sec call, then like the other two picks.
Vote negative to endorse the alpha that the image is zero self-suggests that made in the one means that if we win a risk of our archelocentrism net benefit, you should vote negative. The net benefit is not ochelocentrism, their inclusion of images is a way of describing objection or invoking horror, as they said, both process and the one is an ableist frame that assumes equal access to vision and valorizes the ability to visualize in the first place. 1 and 2 Hughes directly assumes every one argument they made, even if they don't assume that everyone can see or they themselves have not said images are necessary to the project of the app. Argument is that assuming that images or visual analysis can somehow internalize an understanding of the world that cannot be understood by not accessing those images is valid for disabled people and permitted by an ableist gaze. There was no solve steps that made in the one error, which means that we can still include all of their analysis about objection, the lever, etc. Which means that a risk that we win that this is bad means that you should vote neg. Their only answer was images are good to terrify people. This is our argument. The assumption that everyone has the access to those images, and that people who are otherwise impaired can somehow internalize that and be terrified of the lever is exactly what we are critiquing. Is exactly what we are critiquing, that they performably reassumed even if their next argument was that they themselves just chose to include it and not everyone has to use it. This is our argument, because even if they haven't forced it onto disabled people, the assumption that by looking at something we can understand something about the world, like they themselves have said, is bad. It is bad because it valorizes the idea of vision, which relies on an oculocentric frame in the first place. That means that if we win frame subtraction, that the pick is legitimate, you should automatically vote negative. Go to frame subtraction now. Our interpretation is that the negative's burden is to negate any of the asked frames, including 1AC frames and cross-6 moment. We can agree with the vast majority of the app, but you should still vote negative. They have dropped that the alternative to us negating specific frames would be having to say that every single part of the app is bad or false, which is much worse for their arguments about disabled objection and stealing their labor, because it means that we have to negate truisms like objection bad or disabled or ableist bad, etc., which is much worse. They say it steals disabled labor. You should reject the privatization of academic work. It makes ideas property, which is a neoliberal logical commodification that says that we should accept problematic ideals in the name of individual ownership. Even if they win this argument, the critique turns the entirety of the case because it affects their ability to spread their knowledge or understanding of objection to the rest, to disabled people, which causes even more objection and turns all of their arguments out of the role of the ballot. Their argument about functional and textual competition is ridiculous. There was 0-1 for this. If they said fairness, they've patterned on the other page, which is that you should not prioritize this. If we win that it's a better model for testing it, then vote neg. Independently, and independently is key to negative ground. Not defending the resolution means that you should expand competition, and even if they did defend the resolution, they themselves have said that research models and certain understandings are good. It's reciprocal because they have deployed different parts of the app against neg arguments. It's also necessary for critical refinement. Our debates are all or nothing or better for critical education. We need to test and refine specific parts of the 1C because they chose to include the images for a reason. So you should hold them to it. They say it's not key to negative ground. Yes, it is key to negative ground because anything else means that we have to resort to generics, whereas the app always gets infinite prep time to skirt all of that, and it's independently key to test other kinds of ableism. We're not going to go. The topic we're not going to go for it. We'll kick out of it. None of these patterns are reasons to reject the team. At best, they're a reason our model is bad. We'll concede that they meet and that they're topical, which is that all of their critiques of topicality don't apply. If they're saying that the imposition of topicality is bad, then that doesn't make sense. They say that it's a form of objection. We're not objecting them. We're not objecting them, but we're not saying that something that they have done is bad, because our interpretation was just that the negative itself does not have the burden of rejoinder, which means that they can still appear by which means that they can still break the norms, they can still break the rules and procedures if they want to. They can still read this app. It's just a question of what the negative does and does not have to engage with, which is why we worded the interpretation that way, which solves all of their patterns independently. These were not reasons to negate, and the pick would solve all of it because it still allows for their analysis of research, and if they're topical, then they chose themselves to abide by the rules and procedures of debate, so they can't critique the rules and procedures or the imposition of those rules because they've conceded that that's a double turn because they adhere to every other rule in the first place. This also drop the argument solves because if we read a bad argument, then we should have to go for anything else causes us to go for arguments that are obviously violent. To the critique, we're not going to go for it. It is not a performative contradiction. We have not said that you should prioritize indigenous authors. We just said that you should reject certain understandings of settler colonialism because that's how it gets internalized. It's not a performative contradiction. We should get to test them from multiple angles, which is key because if they were racist in multiple ways, then we should get to call them out in multiple ways. This is functional conditionality in another way. It's also not a double turn on framework. We never said that the framework is just another way of us being able to engage, which means that we should better be able to engage with a digital scholarship because if we can't predict the 1AC, then we can't read an actual critique or engage with a digital scholarship or critiques of the 1AC, which means that prior to this, their argument about fungibility was not a reason to drop us. It was at best an pattern to decolonization, which is a reason to drop the argument, not the team, and the pick would solve it. The other two picks, we're not going to go. We're going to kick out of the metaphor pick, but it still takes out the case. One, it proves that their metaphorization of the lever increases stigma, it causes ableism. Leprosy is not a modern medical issue anymore, but using it as a metaphor to symbolize broader objection, like they said in cross-6, increases violence and causes co-option by the right who use that discourse to perpetuate illness. Second, zero solvency, cannot spill up, no impact, and their paradigm and it's a bad paradigm for studying violence because it's factually wrong, and the metaphor breaks down under scrutiny, which means that their entire theory of objection, psychosis, etc. is wrong, which states that every single impact turn. It also means that the pick has to come first. Independently, the Kristeva pick, you can also include this under frame subtraction. Their idea to include their entire theory is based off of Kristeva's theories. They read articles citing Kristeva. The title of one of their articles is Investigating Kristeva. It shows them at least 30 times in the 1C, which means if they read an Orientalist author, and their entire theory is based off of the work of someone who's Orientalist, you should reject it. They've dropped every single line that we have quoted from Kristeva herself, who says things like Chinese people are seductive, or that the language of Chinese is bland, etc., which is obviously something racist that you should reject. Prior to any other argument, even if they win all of their arguments about objection, this outweighs because it's a question of the specific rhetoric that they use. They also drop that rhetoric must come first prior to every other argument, which means that even if they say that they meet because of implementation, they should still be held for their rhetoric. Anything else just by saying slurs or something racist, which means that you should still hold them to it and reject it prior to every other argument. It also means that they can't weigh the case against the pig or weigh any kind of solvency deficit, because it means that their theory of objection itself is wrong because it's based off of Kristeva's work, and if Kristeva's Orientalist, then you shouldn't give it to them. There was no solvency deficit, which means that they have to win images good. Even if they win that they didn't force images onto people, arguments that the assumption that images can in any way transfer some information onto the person who's looking at them is ableist, because it assumes that, because it valorizes that ability to visualize. The impact patterns are obviously reasons to drop the argument, and the pig would solve it. Their research comes first.
Great. 3 minutes of prep, just starting down.
then the metaphors pick, then the Kristeva pick. Yeah, sorry. Case, the metaphor, leprosy metaphor pick, then the Kristeva Orientalist pick, then the popularization visual images pick.
Missing taking the was dropping the case, civil society spotted around the quest to purge the adder, which is discussing roles the other than Russia's illusion of civil sensitivity, conceded absolutely, putting after endorsement of open borders, human migration, and serves adjective bodies into normal civil society, endorsed and crisis by bringing society into contact with what it fears the most. I'll answer their solid push on the metaphor. Pick here, they have dropped the link turn that the act does not literally describe leprosy as a stigmatizing experience. We rather reclaim leprosy through objection and retool negative desires towards better ends, which is our Sebastian evidence and our entire attitude. They dropped our argument on the case for why leprosy is not a metaphor, rather it is a real metaphorical, is it a real material experience that was experienced whose logic undergirds modern migration policies, which is the entire thing of the affirmative. They've dropped the liminal investments, control the internal link to how we engage in materialism on the case, which was the cross application on the green evidence on the case, which means that they don't get any of the tuner solvency push, but they also drop the entirety of the case, which is that you should have a very high bar for voting on a new tuner solvency deficit. The next thing about Christeva Orientalism, drop the last argument here as well. Voting out retools Christeva's work towards better ends. They've dropped that embracing the figure of objections causes the subjectivity chase because we're forced to come to terms with how broken that our bodies can be, which Russia's is symbolic. That's all the work we did in our Semesky evidence in the one I see. Read it, it's fantastic. Drop argument that we can retool Christeva's work. So even if Christeva herself is Orientalist, the way the app is presented Christeva is not, because they do not have a specific link to the affirmative representations or the way we have deployed our app in the context of open borders, which have framed this pick. Now the last pick, this is the only thing the tuner can vote on and the only thing the tuner spent his majority of this time on, but they have not adequately answered the visual images are good, nor the lone link, which is pretty pathetic because it was the only thing the tuner really went for. I'll explain why visual images are good here, but why it's not the only option for objection. Semesky says that being confronted with the figure of the deformed adjunct bodies opens our own borders to the horror of objection. This is our own advocacy. Terrifying liberal subjectivity happens when you open ourselves towards objection, creating an asignifying rupture between subject and object, which is a prerequisite to new forms of being. They see that we don't have a solvency test, and guess what? This is it. We have an argument for why visual images are good, and they drop the rule of balance, embrace objection, which we said, and worse, that is sufficient to vote affirmative right here because they don't have a sufficient towards case argument that is indexed towards open borders. But I'll extend a priest of terminal defense to all the tutors' offense about how we assume that images are necessary to engage in objection and how presenting images ourselves is ableist. This is just simply wrong and a mischaracterization of what I see evidence. Extending the null link here, we don't assume that images are necessary to engage in objection. Just say that it can be a platform for such, which is a line out of the 1 yard. Like we presented images that was below the ASCII test, but they shouldn't have a solvency test into the after the 1 C. They didn't. They conceded that it's not just the images, but the speech act, the theoretical inventiveness, the fact that we inserted this app inside debate. That is a good thing because it ruptures the figure of the normie. It is not necessarily the images that we are forcing people to sort of view, which means that the app is not tied to the images, which means that the ASCII of the app is not tied to the images of the app, which means that they can't, as Halsey does, the tour cross out boils down to disabled people can't see, therefore images are ableist. This is so incredibly asinine, and the no link applies. This is akin to saying exploiting immigrants is fine because immigrants move and disabled people can't. Voting app does not valorize those images. It just engages in that as one tool for non-disabled people. This also makes sense because disabled are the figure of the adjunct, which is what we traverse in the first place to see the absolute. Okay.